So I apologize that the video before this one cut out the sound at the very end. You'd think after 2 years of a pandemic we'd have some tech figured out, but nonetheless it happens. So I want to try and give you the last 3 minutes of that recording, and so that you can get the fullness of that meditation in preparation for Sunday. So I left off talking about how we don't get from grief to praise, as if praise is the goal or as if praise is the end of grief, but rather that grief and praise exist together, that they exist ongoingly as one, and that is a good thing. Martin goes on to say that grief and praise are renters in the house of love, that love is the landlord that grief and praise rent from. And I like that imagery because it paints a picture that all of our grief, all of our praise comes from a place of love. That if we don't love what we lose, then there is no grief for the loss of it, and then there is no praise for the life that it had if we don't love it. He goes on to say that because grief and praise are best friends, and that they live together in the same building that is owned by love, they live in opposing quarters in the left and the right chambers of love's great thumping house called the heart. And again, I like that imagery that in this house that love owns called the heart, that exists our grief and our praise together. I think that sets a tone for us going forward as we learn to talk about our grief, to put language to our grief, and recognize that praise accompanies that grief, that we come from it at a place of love, and that it lives in our hearts. And I think that is a good place for us to begin our conversations in this series is, what about your grief has to do with love? What about your praise comes from a place of love, and how do those two exist together? If it weren't for the grief that we express, we wouldn't know what life is meant to be. If we didn't express grief in a way that leads us to praise, that accompanies praise, we wouldn't know what it's like to live this life. Because the person we're grieving, or the thing that we're grieving that we've lost, our life is different. It's changed without it. Something is missing. And so we're grateful to have that in our lives, but we're also saddened and hurt by it no longer being there. So I want you to explore this week, what have you been grieving? Or whom have you been grieving? It can be more than one thing or more than one person. It can be grief that happened 25 years ago, or it can be grief that happened last month. But I want you to feel comfortable bringing that, if you are, to our group discussions on Sunday so that we can get to know one another better. We're going to spend the first part of that Sunday morning getting to know one another better, and then we'll spend the second part just sharing some things that we have grieved, or some people we have grieved, or are continuing to grieve. And then we'll kind of transition into what do grief and praise look like together for us. So I hope that you'll join us on Sunday at 11, whether it's, like I said, whether it's at the St. Peter's building or on Zoom, and you can look for the details of that Zoom link in your emails. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, I apologize for the technological difficulties, but I hope that you enjoyed this meditation and that it stirred something for you. Thank you.